as promised, it was another busy week in Illinois politics. So for whatever reason, people keep doing this to us. We record these on Thursday afternoon, release them on Friday as like a recap of the week, which is on purpose because we want to get the whole week. But it seems like now every week there's stuff breaking Thursday night, Friday. We've got the Bailey campaign announcement tonight, so we don't have everything available to us to speak about it, though I'm sure we will. So when you're watching this Friday or over the weekend, yet again, you're probably going to know a little more than we do. But whatever, we're still going to talk because we're in politics and we can always talk and give our opinions, even when we don't even have facts or data to back it up, because that's politics. So we're going to test that theory and test those skills this week. Our guest this week, we've got two awesome guests. We've got Travis Weaver. He's a state representative for the 93rd District. And also, for those who don't know, got married last month. So congrats, Travis, and thanks for being here.
There it is. There's the bling.
Very nice.
Bought and paid for.
A month in, everything's still good? Yeah, no problem.
We're rocking and rolling, man.
All
We're
right.
rocking and rolling. We're just about to 6 weeks on Saturday. Not that we're, counting.
All right. My wife and I have our 10-year anniversary in a couple weeks. And
congrats,
this is how
man.
glamorous it gets. We're going to spend our 10-year anniversary at a client's dinner as opposed to like us going out and doing something. So apparently we're boring. That's just how it gets at 10 years, I guess.
You're in.
Yeah, pretty much. Speaking of Larry, what's up, Larry? Larry's a longtime friend, and many people probably know him. He's a longtime Politico, president of the Lake County Republican Federation. He's been doing politics for over 20 years. He's been an elected official. You're an attorney. How's it going, Larry?
It's going great. It's hard to keep up with everything, that's for sure.
That's true. But glad you're here. And I know, we dragged you out to a smoke-filled room thing in person where it was actually smoke-filled and didn't do so great for your lungs. So here,
never came back because it's my asthma.
Yeah, there we go. So now we've got a virtual smoke-filled, so it'll work better for you. Okay, as always, there's Michael, there's Chris. Michael, I'm pretty pumped. It looks like you might be like not in a basement or a closet. You're like in an actual house, though, buddy.
Yeah, changed it up a little bit.
Yeah, that's exciting. Chris, still in mom's or grandma's basement there?
Yep, still in grandma's basement, but it's okay. I did get a haircut, so nobody has to, the mob doesn't have to attack me this weekend after last week where I demanded they tell me to get a haircut. So I finally got a haircut. I look somewhat presentable now, so thank you for everybody with their kind words.
Yeah, I don't think the words were kind, and I'm sure they'll still find some way to come after you.
That's right. Well,
where's the fun in a boring week? All right, let's get into our first topic. Usually we make you guys sit through the vegetables before we get into why you're really here, which is politics for our viewers and our listeners. But this time, you know what? We're going to start with politics and then go to the vegetables. I will plead with you to stick with us. Don't just, digest the fun content and then skip past the meaty stuff, because we've got some really meaty topics this week that we definitely need to be talking about as Republicans and conservatives. But we're going to let you have your dessert first, and we're going to talk politics. As I mentioned, we're recording this Thursday afternoon. Today, Darren Bailey is announcing his run for governor with his running mate Aaron Del Mar. As of the time of this recording, they're at their second stop or finishing their second stop. The big event is tonight, and obviously I don't have time travel control, so I can't tell you what's going to happen tonight, but we can talk about this, that we've got a new entrant into the governor's race, the second in 2 weeks. Looks like we finally have some serious candidates in this race. So I feel like we're all going to want to share our thoughts on the governor's race at large, but since the big news is Bailey's announcement, let's stick with that first. Anybody have thoughts on Darren announcing with a running mate, Aaron Del Mar? What are your thoughts on this? Anybody can jump in. Usually in the first topic, everyone's really nice and wait for somebody else.
I'll start. I just have to say,
attaboy, Larry
Falbe, new guest today. I am an attorney, so my opinions and my comments are my own, not my firm's, not my clients, not the Lake County Republican Federation. So take nothing I say seriously at all, and we'll change all the names to protect the guilty. So here's how I see this race shaping up. I am glad that we're starting to get some better known candidates. It doesn't hurt to have a fairly wide field, at least at this point, because voters have options, and options are always a good thing. The concern I have is when we start to see the same candidates pop up who did not have a good showing, right, previously. The first question I would ask if I had Darren and Aaron sitting in front of us on the panel is, what are you going to do differently this time that is going to change the results? Because the last time it was just a smackdown. And we can talk in great detail if we want about how the primary shaped up and Pritzker pouring money in to, get Darren Bailey as a candidate because that was what he wanted to run against. I think that the same is probably going to happen this time. But how are we going to change the result if Darren and Aaron do win? And I think they're the presumed front runners just because of the name recognition at this point.
Yeah, Larry, let me share a data point just to back up what you're talking about. Obviously, you do politics, you pay attention more than just Lake County, but you've got a long history there in your home county of Lake. And we've shared some of this data before. When you compare how Ronner did in 18 to how Bailey did in 2022, that's really instructive because overall, Bailey beat Ronner. Around the state, Bailey beat Ronner. One of the challenges or concerns that some of us have is within the suburbs where Bailey underperformed Ronner significantly, and that could hurt us in some of these battleground districts. Ronner lost Lake County by less than 8 points. Bailey lost it by almost 24 points. And so when you talk about, Larry, when you think about like Lake County, that's the concern is maybe statewide, Darren actually did decent. And we've talked about some of the key districts Republicans need to win where Darren actually overperform Ronner. It might be helpful. But in some areas, and Larry, for you specifically, Lake County, that's a huge gap, which could be killer for some of our candidates. So just to share that data to back up what you're saying.
Yeah, and the conversation we never seem to have as Republicans, at least not during the primary, is who can win in the general, right? That seems to be almost an afterthought. And I've had many conversations with our people on the more right side of the spectrum up here in Lake County, and they would, to the last person, rather vote for somebody who they thought was right on the issues and right morally and hit all those buttons, even if they know they're going to get crushed in the general election. Because for many people, politics is conflated with religion. Politics is conflated with morality. It's not about winning the race. It's not about who can win the race and change the direction of the state. It's about how they feel about themselves to be able to vote for somebody. And I get it, believe me. But if you don't look forward to the general election, you wonder why you're not having a seat at the table and why the Democrats have completely swept all the statewide elected offices. That's why, in large part. Edgar and Mark Kirk, that's been long since gone.
Well, you can't change laws, Chris, 1 second. You can't change the laws if you don't win elections. So I think that's the point you're making. Chris, go ahead.
I agree with Larry a great deal. The only thing I'd say is that why, as a party, do Republicans feel the need to say that, like, I'm going to vote for the guy who's more ideologically pure, even though I know he's not going to win the general election? Why can't we have ideologically, quote, strong, unquote, candidates who are good general election candidates also? It isn't necessarily just about policy. Yeah, sure. Policy is a great deal to do with elections. But at the end of the day, it comes down to whether or not you can run a good campaign. And one of the things Darren Bailey showed in 2022 is that he didn't run a good general election campaign. He just didn't. I think if Darren Bailey runs a better general election campaign in 2022, he probably picks up 1 or 2 points statewide and helps some of these candidates in the suburbs. The problem with Darren isn't just necessarily that he's too conservative, which maybe he is. It's that I don't think a lot of people trust him to get to a general election and actually run an effective campaign. It's been said by, frankly, many of Ted Dabrowski's people have said this, but it's been said that a lot of Darren's donors from last time are donating to Ted Dabrowski. Are they going to be around in this election? Is Darren Bailey going to have the same level of money that he had last time? I don't think so. And that's why my gut instinct right now is that Darren's going to do worse in the general election this time than he did 4 years ago, because some factors out of his control and some factors that are fully within his control.
So I think both you guys raised something that's really interesting about how, no matter what happens in the general, we all want to be able to support somebody that aligns with our conservative values, and it's just hard to compromise on that. It's interesting because when I look at, I would say, the 3 legitimate candidates, Ted, Darren, and Sheriff Mendrick, they're all pretty dang conservative. I mean, I can't point to an issue where I think, oh, he's a flip-flopper or he's weak on that issue. They're all pretty dang beefed up on their conservative chops. So then to me, it just comes to one question. If they all pass my conservative test, then the only thing remaining is who has the best chance to win. I have to say this is a good question because it's one that I'm still learning how to answer. It's no secret I'm a big Ted fan. I've been working with Ted since February to decide if he was going to do this. But I'm also a big Darren fan. I mean, consider him a friend. Proudly supported him in 22, knocked on doors for him, did all I could to help him, hosted an event here in Peoria for him. So it's hard because I like him. I respect him. I want to see him do well. I just have so much appreciation for him and Cindy both. But we all know the definition of insanity, trying the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And one thing I expect that we'll hear is, well, but what about Trump, right? Trump lost in 2020 and he won in 2024. So isn't that picking somebody who lost in the past and was successful in the future?
But he was running against a different opponent.
Different
It wasn't the
opponents.
same matchup.
And he lost by 4%, not 12.5%. And I looked this up before we got on here. Trump lost by 120,000 votes because it came down to the 4 states that he needed to flip. So nationwide, he lost by 120,000 votes. Just in Illinois 4 years ago, we lost by 500,000 votes. So much easier of a hill. I shouldn't say easy, because what Trump did was one of a kind, monumental, but it's just not the same.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think what Chris is saying is something I want to amplify, because I think for too long, what we see is this sort of conservative versus moderate. And it always drives me crazy, I'll be honest, because I don't, that isn't actually the problem. With Darren Bailey, he didn't lose because he was too conservative. He lost because he was a poor communicator and ran a bad campaign. I have elected pro-life people in blue districts. It's not, yes, it's easier, admittedly, it's easier to elect somebody whose values perfectly align with the average voter in their district, but it's not impossible to say that somebody could get elected statewide just because maybe they're a little more conservative than I might be, or Larry, or somebody else. The problem is you have to be able to carry those issues and communicate them effectively to the voters, and that's where Darren has struggled. We've been told he's grown. I'd like to see it. I've said before on the record, I'm going to give him that chance to see if he's grown on that. We've watched now several elections in a row where he hasn't, but let's see. Let's give him that shot, because the problem isn't that he's too conservative. I think, as Travis said, there's very little space between any of these candidates. They're all pretty conservative. The question is who can communicate more effectively, run the better campaign, and defeat J.B. Pritzker, which is what we need to do.
Well, and that, I think, is what do you lead with, right? Nobody's saying don't be a conservative. Nobody's saying hide the fact you're a conservative. But what are you going to push? Whatever happened to the traditional Republican values of smaller government and lower taxes, right? What about leading with those, not leading with guns and abortion in the suburbs of Chicago, where it doesn't resonate very well, right?
Well, the problem there, Larry, is that I can
lead with the traditional principles.
I can tell you from experience, I mean, all of us were around, and well, most of us, Chris might have still been in the womb, but most of us were around in 2022. And Darren didn't lead
in 2022.
I know. Darren didn't lead with guns and abortion. I think this is the key thing to understand. It's not that Darren led with the wrong issues. When they ran that campaign in 2022, they led with those right Republican issues. But of course, Democrats and the media and their opponents are going to push them and try to get them to speak about guns and abortion and Trump and everything that's unpopular. That's the key, is can you handle that? Because they did lead with decent issues in the last race. They could do better, and so far I've seen signs that they could do better. But that's not the problem. The problem is when the media goes screaming at you, well, what about X? Or when your opponents attack you, do you take the bait, or are you able to stay on message? That's the key thing here. And already, we'll talk about this when we get to the immigration issue. Already I'm seeing some signs that the campaign's taking the bait. You know, the Pritzker people pushed on immigration, and immediately Bailey's like jumping out and defending Trump. It's like, okay, well, you're showing then you haven't grown, because if you're going to immediately just be the biggest Trump defender in the planet, that's not necessarily going to work in a general election in Illinois. So it's not about leading, because I will defend Darren there. He didn't lead with abortion. He didn't lead with guns.
Yeah, last time, but this time I think he already, as you say, Collin, has taken the bait, because what we saw in Capitol Facts today, that was the topic, right?
Yeah, fair. But I just, again, I always want to be fair here and make sure I'm giving the truth. And it's not about leading. Every candidate, any candidate can lead with the right issues. It's when the hit hits when the hit hits the shan. I'm trying to do that backwards on purpose so that I'm not swearing on YouTube. But when things actually hit on a in a campaign, can you stay on topic? And that's where Darren struggled last time. And then of course not having the funds to push his narrative out.
Right.
One wrinkle this time, and I don't know how it shakes out. Maybe somebody else has an opinion. But 4 years ago, there was a whole basket of legitimate candidates, right? Bailey, Irvin, Sullivan, Schimpf, and Rabine. I mean, all five, I think, had viable chances. This time, I kind of wonder if it's just going to be two. I just checked, and Mendrick has raised $12,000 the whole quarter, $1,000 in the last month. I think that it's a better race when we have an engaged DuPage leader. So even though he's not my guy, I'm actually cheering for him. But when you raise $12,000 in a quarter, it's just hard. So I just wonder if it really ends up being a two-person race. I actually don't know who that benefits more as opposed to a five-person race we had a couple years ago.
I mean, it will be a two-person race. I mean, you are, and we talked about this on Facebook last week. I love, Travis, you're positive. It's your thing, and you're awesome at it. I'm a little bit less, and I'll say there's a reason why we've called Mendrick a semi-serious candidate. On paper, I was talking to a member of the media this week, and I told him on paper, Mendrick is awesome on paper. I mean, you couldn't almost script a better candidate. The problem is the reality hasn't matched that, and until it does, it's a two-person race. This is Ted versus Darren right now. Maybe Mendrick surprises us in the coming months, but right now it is a two-person race.
Well, do you have a sense on who you think how that favors or how that changes the race for 2 versus 5?
I mean, in this race, you've got to imagine Bailey's support is baked in. So when you've got multiple challengers to Bailey, who's in essence the front runner or the incumbent here on the Republican side, it probably helps you not to have to split sort of that anti-Darren vote. I also know that the fewer votes that Mendrick gets out of DuPage County, I know some of the TED people are frustrated that Mendrick might steal some of their suburban votes. So I'd imagine if it is a two-person vote, that probably does help to some regard Dabrowski's campaign.
And one quick thing is I anticipate lower turnout in this primary than 4 years ago. I don't know if you're getting the same vibes that I am from just on the ground and projections and all that things, but lower turnout in this primary is going to help Darren. Like Collin said, the support's baked in. He's getting a certain number of votes just because these people are so enthralled with him, and I think to Aaron Delmar's credit, is going to help him a little bit, maybe in the northern suburbs, because there are some people who are going to vote for Bailey just because they want to vote for Aaron. Maybe they voted for Rabine 4 years ago or something like that. So while I believe in my heart of hearts that Darren Bailey is a beatable candidate in a primary, I also am a realist, an extreme pessimist, if you haven't been able to tell from the years we've been doing this podcast. But as a realist and a pessimist, I'm going to say that Darren Bailey support's baked in, and he's the front runner right now. It may be Darren and Ted, but it's Darren and Ted with Darren with a lead, basically.
Well, and Chris, I think you shared an interesting point. We're going to have to watch to see what happens with turnout, because if it is lower turnout, this reminds me a lot of the 2010, and now I'm definitely aging myself a bit, but the 2010 gubernatorial primary where Bill Brady wasn't considered the guy who was going to pull this off, but low turnout made him win. I mean, Annie McKenna was sort of that, that more, I don't know, I'll say the term establishment choice, and had a lot of support, had a lot of money, and was able to push that out. But with lower turnout, Brady's base was much stronger, and they were showing up to the polls, and Brady was able to eke out that primary over Dillard and McKenna and Jim Ryan and Giefsky and Proft and Schillerstrom. Schillerstrom was the other. So, I mean, it could be similar if it's low turnout.
Well, I think you saw 2-3 weeks ago, we saw that poll that was released that had Darren with 33%, of the vote. Darren's a known commodity, especially with Republican primary voters. So that shows you that there's, a significant segment, 67% that are either, leaning towards a specific candidate or other than Darren, or, considering voting for somebody else. And I think a lot of voters, from the conversations that I've had with precinct committeemen and chairmen and people that are involved in this on a day-to-day level, are asking a lot of the same questions that we've been asking. What's going to be different? Darren wants to give this another try. What's he going to do differently this time? And I think messaging, that's a key part of it, but also they have to show they can, build out that infrastructure to run like a serious race, especially for a November election. You can't have it like it was last time where, there wasn't any mail going out. There weren't any TV ads. There wasn't really any digital. I mean, it was hop on the bus, drive around, make the voters come to us. Obviously, that didn't work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and that's where I come down to what Chris and I were saying about the quality of the campaigns. There's a reason why last week I was a little hard on Ted and his campaign and their performance in the rollout. I don't know how Darren's rollout's going to go. So I will be fair and be just as hard on Darren's once I see it, but we haven't seen it yet. So that'll be next week's podcast. Feel free to turn in.
He better not use any AI, Colin. I swear I'm coming for him.
But I think the big thing here is, it's funny. I already have a few texts from people who've texted me saying, showing photos of Darren, like, and saying, look, this is better than Ted's front porch. Because honestly, if I had to pick one thing that I liked the least of the announcement, was doing it in front of a $2+ million home. It's like Trump has done such a great job changing our party to be the party of the working families and of the working class. There is still that old school Republican country club, Larry Falbe Republican, who, is still sort of that old mentality. And so doing your announcement in Wilmette in front of a multi-million dollar home, it takes us a little bit backwards on that. That's what I've gotten the most text today about with the Bailey announcement.
What was it worse than the podium though?
Well, listen, I'm trying. I said my piece once. I don't want to pile on, but I could.
Well, Colin, could somebody argue he's already got the downstate vote sewn up, so maybe he does really need to go after the country club Republican, and that's the way to do it.
Possible.
All 5 of them left.
Yeah,
all 5 of them left.
But that is the problem. So I don't want to get too lost on topic here because we have limited time for all of our topics. But I will say the group that has left Republicans the most in the era of Trump is that old school, male, moderate, country club style Republican. They're not actually voting in Republican primaries anymore.
Here anymore. Most of them are in Florida, Wisconsin.
Oh, there's that. But to win in the general election. To win in the general election, we must bring them back home. So we haven't talked a lot about the general election because we're still in the primary, but Larry brings up a point that we are going to spend several topics in the near future on, which is if Republicans are going to win, we have to bring those people back home. Those every time DeVore and others put out, like, look at all the Republicans who aren't voting, who either voted for Trump, like, they are right to a degree that we need to get more Republicans to the polls. The challenge is twofold. One, they're either only going to show up for Trump, or two, they've actually started to leave the party because either they don't like Trump or they don't like the brand that the party's put forward. We've got some work to do to bring those people back home, which is partially why we need a really good candidate and they need to run a really good campaign. And part of that is, I got a couple quick things I want us to, if you guys have interest in these, sometimes I say something and you're like, yeah, that's a dumb topic, but let's try. So the first thing I want to point to is the Democratic Party came out hard against Bailey when he announced. The County Chairman's Association, the Democratic Party, I'm not going to read their quotes because I'm not going to do their jobs for them, but the point that I'm making here is they repeated every crazy thing about Darren Bailey, all the stuff they used last time they repeated. And so when we talk about how Darren needs to show us he's grown, we got to understand how hard it's going to be to change his brand. I mean, Jeannie Ives ran into this when she ran for Congress, where she did a great job sort of rebranding in that congressional run, but people don't forget who you were yesterday. They're going to keep pushing that narrative. So it's not enough just to say something different today. Once you say it different today, they're going to challenge you. Your opponents, the media, social media, you're going to get challenged on those new things. That's why it's so hard to sort of rebrand. And so even if they do a great job in the announcement, their work's not done. They got 6 months of proving to all of us that they have indeed grown, that they have indeed turned into a campaign that could win in the general election. Because the Dems aren't going to let him get away with just, oh, hey, here we go, I'm different now. Like, they're going to, as they showed just today, they're going to go after him hard. So their work is cut out for him on that campaign.
Well, they think that will help him in the primary and then slaughter him in the general.
Yep, I mean, that's the strategy, right? All right, one other thing I brought up, and I'm curious if our guests this week have thoughts on this, but I brought this up before. John Cass did a piece, and he has this style of writing. A lot of people like him, and I'm going to look past that for a second. There's just one little thing that I really do want to key on, which was his perspective. I think I talked about this last week. So this is what Cass wrote. Can Ted Dabrowski heal Pritzker's Illinois wasteland? And if you read the piece, I encourage you to do so. His blog is johncassnews.com. It's an interesting piece, and it's decently well written. That's not my issue. My issue is this, that the whole thing is sort of from this idea that Illinois is this wasteland and it's ruined and it's dark and dirty and everybody hates being here. And, we're all sort of feeling trapped, stuck in Illinois. Poll after poll has shown that right direction, wrong track is pretty break even in Illinois. It's not, the reality isn't that Illinois is a hellhole, that it's a wasteland. That's not what voters think in this state. And Bailey has shown this with some of his early comments. We've seen some of it from some of Ted's supporters, not from his campaign directly, but some of his supporters. I'm just a little bit nervous at this, that if we approach this through the bubble In our bubble, Illinois is horrible, but the actual voters of the state don't believe that Illinois is this wasteland that some of these people involved in these campaigns seem to think. And so if you just assume that you can run this campaign and be like, look, I'm going to save you from how horrible Illinois is, well, if they don't actually believe Illinois is horrible, then that message failed and you're out. They're not going to vote for you. We've got to understand how the voters actually think in this state, and they do not think it's the hellhole that you and your buddies think it is at the bar on a Friday night. We've got to understand that. I don't know. Anybody have thoughts on that, or am I just, I don't know.
I totally agree. I mean, like, if you want to win primaries, that's a great message. Everybody in the Republican Party thinks we're on the wrong track. If you want to win independents, and if you want to let Democrats see the light, look, you catch more flies with honey. And I think that when you come with logic and hey, this is where we are, but this is where we can be. I kind of think about it like, I don't know if we got any Bears fans listening. My frustration with Caleb Williams is that, like, he's not doing terrible. He's just not the man that I think that he can be. I see such potential for him. And like, my frustration isn't that like he misses passes. My frustration is that he's not achieving his full potential. And that's how I feel about Illinois. Like, look, I'd rather live in Illinois than anywhere else. Obviously, I live here. I chose to live here. And my frustration is that we can be so much better. Our farm ground, our rivers, our lake, our manufacturing capacity, our people, our secondary institutions, so much potential that we're missing out on. So to me, it's not about saying Illinois sucks. It's about saying Illinois can be so much better if we just do a better job of capturing our potential.
100%. And if these candidates can run with that kind of a message, we're going to see a whole different ballgame, because Republicans are just sort of, I mean, Pritzker's not wrong when he labels us, the terms he uses, doom grifters and whatever else. To some degree, he's right. I mean, Republicans in the state have become so negative and so pessimistic. We need a dose of Travis Weaver. Like, we need some positivity in saying, hey, listen, we have problems. Like, don't hide from that. We have problems, but here's what it could look like under Republican leadership. Your lives could be so much better, and here's how. That's the way to present this, because voters aren't going to vote for the doom and gloom. They don't believe it, and so they're not going to vote for it.
We can be a top 5 state. I really believe that. Like, look, we don't have beaches in the sun 12 months a year, but Ohio does it. Wisconsin does a nice job. Iowa, Indiana, they all do a really nice competitive job. They're dropping their income tax. We can do that.
So I got one word for you. It's not plastics. It's not ball bearings. It's micro-targeting, right? Because I think there is a portion of the electorate that really does resonate. That message really does resonate with them. I think the challenge is finding the people to whom that message resonates, and then finding the positive people and giving them the positive message, right? That we have the technology to do that kind of stuff nowadays. So I think it's all about the polling. It's all about the research. It's all about reaching those people and finding out what message resonates with which groups, because I don't think you can blow sunshine up everybody's orifice.
Pull the Pritzker, just gaslight everybody.
Well, look, let's look at crime. Let's look at the economy. There's a whole bunch of bad news out there. And yes, there is a bunch of good news as well. And we've got a lot of good advantages, some great advantages in Illinois. But you can't hide from reality. And I think you need to address that before you go for the positive. It reminds me of a typical campaign messaging cycle where you go negative, 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 because that, fear sells. But then at the end, those last ads before the election are all positive ads. Right.
Maybe if fear sold and if the negative sold, I think Republicans would have been winning the last 6-8 years. But I do get your point. And when Ronner won, to your credit and to defend you, when Ronner won, that is how they did it. It was negative, 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 and then over the last 3 to 4 weeks, positive. But I will point out, when Ronner actually, his numbers jumped, I have all the polling data. When Ronner's numbers jumped is when they went positive. That was when the actual numbers really moved in that race. But it worked. He won. So Larry, you could have a point.
Well, and how is Pritzker going to attack Bailey? It's going to be fear. It's going to be fear of Bailey tied with Trump, all the horrible things. I mean, because the Democrats always make you afraid of imaginary stuff, right? Trump's going to take your democracy. All these horrible, horrible things are going to happen. It's not based in reality. It's all fear mongering. But that is going to be the message we hear if Darren's a candidate until the election day.
Yeah, but Larry, the Democrats are playing with such a large cushion. They can afford to just go, Darren Bailey's a MAGA extremist. He's going to take away your abortions. Like, it doesn't matter if that's effective messaging or not. When you got 12 points to work with and the Republicans aren't doing anything to stop you, yeah, they're going to keep rolling.
Billions of dollars, too, because that's the other big factor we haven't talked about. Where is the money going to come from? When you have a billionaire, a billionaire, he's not
the opposite is self-made.
A billionaire in the race who has no compunction about spending whatever it needs to take to win. It takes a lot of resources.
Larry, I'm sorry to say, you might be the early frontrunner for a clown nomination for calling him a self-made
Yeah,
billionaire.
that was a Freudian slip.
Right. One last thing. Let's close here on this topic and then get to some of our others. Let's level set and focus where the focus needs to be. We've all done really good in this conversation, but let's end on this, which is Pritzker's got to go. Every single week, we are reminded, and we're going to have some instances later in this podcast where we're going to remind you just how bad Pritzker is. And so that's got to be the focus. March 17th is the scrimmage. The real game starts, at 7:01 March 17th in PM. And that's our real opponent. So I just want to point to something. This is small, but it just made me roll my eyes. Where Pritzker in the last week called for a boycott of ABC and WGN because of Jimmy Kimmel. And obviously this is old news now since Kimmel is back. But free speech is at stake. Write letters, write emails, post online, protest. I mean, Pritzker has become such a partisan hack. Travis, when you talk about like the potential somebody has, I think the reason why I'm so mean towards Pritzker and have been is because he had the potential. Because he was a billionaire, he had the potential to be one of the greatest governors Illinois had ever seen. But he has just become such a gigantic partisan hack at this point. I mean, Lane will bring it up on screen just this week. The House Judiciary GOP has put out that Google admitted that they were censoring under Biden, that they removed from YouTube a whole bunch of conservatives, and now they're being forced to bring them back. Again, Lane will bring up that press release on screen, but we've talked about it. I talked about it on my social media. Like, if you were okay that conservatives were censored on social media because of Biden's White House and censored on Google and search engines, if you were okay that conservative personalities were ripped off the air because of things you didn't like that they said, then you have to be okay that Kimmel was ripped off. I mean, you can't have a double standard here. It's wrong in both instances, but if you're such a partisan hack like Pritzker is, like, oh, let's protest because of Jimmy Kimmel. That's not a governor of a major state like Illinois. I'd love to have an actual respectable leader in this state, and that J.B. Pritzker has proven that he's not that. So we'll have our differences. We'll all pick our candidates in a primary, but the reality is we are on the same damn team, and we cannot forget that.
I think we're a victim of the fact that Pritzker is running for president, and he has been for really the last 4 years. Because with his focus on that and trying to carve out this niche, this territory as the anti-Trump, right? Trump won't be on the ballot. It's still, that's the path to the presidency for Pritzker. That's where all his energy is going. And if you're concentrating on being the anti-Trump and being even more anti-Trump than Newsom, for example, you don't have a lot of time left over to work for the benefit of the people. And there's probably some other things you could do that you can't do politically, because even though it'd be good for the state, it doesn't match the brand. It doesn't match that area you've carved out for yourself.
True.
I also
because it's because he's obsessed with a totally different segment of the voting population, right? He is, making statements and, doing things that are going to win him support of, Democrat primary voters in Iowa and North Carolina and all these early states when the next election cycle comes. It's not about, 2026 and what's best for the state of Illinois. He has gotten this kind of addiction to this dopamine hit that he gets when somebody from MSNBC talks about him in their, nightly monologue. That's what he's going for. And I think, it's tough being a Republican in this state. We all know that, but there's a lot of opportunities out there because that is what Pritzker's focused on. He's not focused on, oh, well, is somebody from, DuPage County going to vote for me again, or are they going to vote for a Republican instead?
Yeah. Travis,
I also think this federal campaigning he's been doing bites him so hard in the Illinois general election because I think it's made him so inauthentic. When he goes on and does this speech about do not let them know any peace in the streets, Republicans, that was so inauthentic. I mean, that's just not him, and when he does his State of the State address and calls Republicans Nazis 6 times in his address, I think somebody puts that in a script for a national campaign. I also don't think that's him. And so then when he says something like Charlie Kirk is a product of Donald Trump's inflammatory rhetoric, he kind of forgets that he's being so inauthentic with these other things he said, because his rhetoric is worse than anybody's. And so he's taking his eye off the ball. I agree with you, Collin. I was optimistic about it at the beginning. I thought maybe he's got enough business background that he can at least be one of these moderate, reasonable Democrats. that train left the station a long time ago.
Yep. All right, let's go to our next topic. We've got some political topics here. We'll go through these a little more quickly here. But I do want to talk about the comptroller race or controller race. Yeah, I'm stuck in a trick bag there. The real way to say it is controller, but everyone's used to comptroller. So do I say it wrong or do I say it right? Anyways, peer pressure. It's so tough. But I've wanted to talk about this for a few weeks. Karina Villa is one of the comptroller candidates. She's the most recent to have announced. And obviously we know Pritzker and the Democrats are going to be pushing Margaret Croak, but Villa is really gonna push this thing far left. And I think we got to talk about it because in the open race with Mendoza moving on to probably lose a race for Chicago's mayor, but we'll see. That is an open seat and probably one of our best chances to take a statewide position in Illinois. Obviously, we all hope we take the governor's race, but that comptroller's race, not only is it open, but voters are conditioned to want a check and balance in that position. They are conditioned to want a Republican in that position. We've got a great chance. And Margaret Croak, I think, is pretty far left. She's been Pritzker's biggest defender. She ran his abortion pack and a whole bunch of other things. But Karina Villa makes her look like a conservative. I mean, she is as far left goes. And if you see since her launch, some of the things that she's done, some of the things that she's said, she is actively going to drag this entire field in that comptroller's race to the left, which opens it up as a great opportunity for Republicans. And I want to get you guys' thoughts on that race.
Collin, I haven't followed that closely. Is Stephanie Kifowitz still running? Is she still one of the Dems in the field?
Yep.
That makes it so interesting because, look, I hope a Republican wins it, but she's, as far as moderate Dems go, she's a veteran. She's very easy to talk to. She worked at Morgan Stanley. She knows fiscal issues well. And I'd just be interested because her and Margaret Crook are not the same breed of Democrat. So, man, if it just will be interesting to see how they play out, because if it does get pulled to the left, can she find a moderate lane, or does she feel like she's got to go down this left path and follow Villa and Croak to try to take the primary?
Based on what I saw on Facebook.
Yeah, and then
what was that, Larry?
I think she already had Kifowitz has already gone more left.
Has she?
And then you wonder where's Mendoza going to fall in this? The rumor is that she's going to be with Holly Kim from your county up there, Larry, and Lake County.
Wow.
It's just a rumor at this point. So it's going to be an interesting field, but we know all these races, the Senate race, the comptroller's race. Once you get past January 1st, they're going to start eating each other and dragging their field further and further left. And again, this is a great opportunity for Republicans if we don't waste it. Right now, we've got a great candidate on the Republican side. It seems like the field's pretty clear for Brian Drew. We'll see what happens. There's still a few weeks left before filing deadline. I've just seen it really interesting that how far left this race may get pretty quickly, even more than the Senate race. And the interesting thing is, the one thing I don't like is if Karina does get nominated, it sort of ruins their talking point about how every single one of their candidates is from Chicago or Cook County, because she would be the only one who isn't. So that's the only thing I don't like, because I do love that contrast that they're there to represent Chicago and maybe a little bit Cook County. And obviously she's not from Cook County. So it would hurt that talking point a little bit. But my goodness, she is, you're talking about far left progressive. She's right there, Chris. She's your kind of Democrat.
That's for sure, Collin. Though I don't know if western suburbs of Chicago necessarily is that big of a contrast between everybody else being from Chicago. I think you'd maybe want to see someone from downstate before you really thought it was a nice contrast. Either way, it's interesting because the comptroller's race is about like finances and whether or not the state can pay their bills and how much money we have in the rainy day fund. But Karina Villa seems to think it's about illegal immigration, which is very interesting. But that's nothing matters in politics. I mean, I've said this before. You can do whatever you want in politics. You can say whatever you want. You can, Margaret Croak might make the Illinois comptroller's race about abortion, and the Democratic voting base will just go with that. It's like, Margaret Croak, she's interesting. She wants to use the rainy day fund to pay for abortions. That's something that really hits home with me as a upper class suburban Democratic primary voter. That's where I think I'm going to go. But the one thing I think is interesting, because I don't really think there's a front runner in the comptroller's field. If you had to put the gun to my head, I'd probably say Margaret Croak because she's getting a lot of nice endorsements. But if Mendoza endorsed Holly Kim, that would certainly throw a monkey wrench into some things, of course. But there's no black candidate in this race. But there isn't, and the black candidates usually get the support of the black electorate. That isn't here now. So, the Cook County Democrats endorsed Croak. That's going to go along with those African American voters. But There's a lot of African American voters from places outside of Cook County. So I'm interested to see where that vote goes. And I'm also certainly glad that I'm no longer part of this race because I don't think I could do it.
What a sad race that is going to end up being decided on politics. Like, I really like that Mark Croak. She's much stronger on letting boys play girl sports than that, Holly Kim. Like, who cares? It's your job to work on the finances.
So common, though,
give me a
Travis,
break.
It makes me sick when you have like local races like state's attorney that has basically nothing to do with abortion.
Yeah.
Even our own candidates.
Or Illinois Supreme Court races. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Well, that's a little.
But you can talk about abortion now, by the way. You can just do whatever you want and get away with it. And they might fine you something after you won, of course. So there are no repercussions anymore. If this is not political advice, you cannot bring me up in a class action lawsuit or any type of other lawsuit.
Larry will represent you.
Do whatever you want in politics.
Larry will represent you. You're fine.
You can do whatever you want. Nobody cares. The law doesn't exist. The Democrats have shown us the way. Just do whatever you want.
Well, and I called out Margaret Croak on Twitter today. Nobody saw her tweet, and nobody will see my tweet. But I think it was pretty funny. I'll have Lane bring it up so I could feel important here. But one thing I saw was interesting was Margaret Croak came out and whacked Darren Bailey when he announced, and of course brought up abortion and assault weapons ban. But then she said, "I'll always support Governor Pritzker because he's fighting for the best future our children deserve." I mean, she is firmly in Pritzker's pocket, and I think if she's the nominee, which is what a lot of establishment Democrats want, I do think that creates a big opening for Republicans because I think there's a great message there of your comptroller needs to be a check and balance on Pritzker and the Democrats. And Margaret Croak was created by Pritzker. She is in his pocket. She is controlled by Pritzker. Do you really want to give control over the state's finances to the governor who has proven he can't manage the state's finances? I do think if Croak is the nominee, it creates a unique opening for Republicans. All right, let's go to our next topic. These ones will be quick, but homeschoolers and others will remember the name Terra Costa Howard. She's now been appointed a DuPage County judge in the 5th Subcircuit there in DuPage County. So, number one, her 42nd House district's going to be open. Trump lost it by nearly 21, so probably not a district that we're going to be able to win, but it is an open race now. She's going to be on the ballot, and this is why I'm bringing this up. Terra Costa Howard, she has to get elected as judge. So she's only appointed through this next election. So she will be on the ballot. And so to those homeschoolers who came out and were so frustrated with what she was trying to push down in Springfield, if you want to have your revenge, then get involved in her race. She's going to be running in the 5th Subcircuit for re-election. It is a Democrat district. It plays D10 to D12. Trump didn't do very good in that district. He lost by 20 in that district. And it's an estimate because it's really hard to pull subcircuits. But thanks to Abe, our data wizard, for pulling this data for us. So I'm not saying we could beat her, but you know what? If you want to show that what she did and you're not happy with it and what she did isn't right, go in there and fight, if only because if we can increase our vote total in that region where Republicans are really struggling, that's going to help our DuPage County candidates. That's going to help our statewide candidates. So you absolutely, if you're part of that homeschool group, here's your chance to go in there and make an impact on elections and on politics. We're looking at you. Chris has been throwing the gauntlet down. So Chris, what do you think?
Does anybody even remember the homeschool debate anymore? Does anybody?
Travis had to live it, so I'm pretty sure he remembers.
He remembers, but that's been out of the news for so long.
Is anybody even? Chris, my petition collectors, because I was out front of the homeschool debate. Man, homeschool families have gone to bat for me to collect petitions. People don't remember, but they remember.
Okay, so you did the right thing, Travis. You found the homeschool families, and now you're like, oh, would you like to help me get reelected to the state legislature? Okay. Is anybody in DuPage County doing that? They got anything going on like that? See, this is why I've been so pessimistic. Is because there was a big news story every single week on this podcast. We talked about the homeschool bill, the homeschool bill, the homeschool bill, the homeschool bill. I don't even remember if it got passed or not, and that just shows how much maybe I'm paying attention.
Yeah,
but
this is more of an indictment of you, Chris, than the political cycle.
Perhaps, Colin, and I'm willing to grant you that. But does anybody care?
Well, the point is this, Chris. I'll say your point for you since you're doing it so poorly. The point you've made previously is that if you really care, you homeschoolers who actually did stop the bill, by the way, and if you're going to make an impact on politics, then you cannot go away. Get involved in the next cycle. That's the challenge you were making, Chris, which was a good challenge, and I gave you credit until you ruined it today. But you did make a great challenge, and I'm continuing that challenge. I'm saying, here's your chance. Go help the Travis Weavers. Go help these Republican candidates, and more importantly, go if they are frustrated directly at Terra Costa Howard. So go get involved in DuPage County politics and help us with some of those races. I'm issuing that challenge. I'm joining you at least previous weeks, Chris. But I'm going to move us on because we're already way beyond time.
Either way, I'll conclude with this. That was my challenge. If you're a homeschool family in and around DuPage County area, figure out who's running against Terra Costa Howard. I doubt anybody runs against her in a primary, but primary, general election, who cares? Make your voice known in this district, because if Terra Costa Howard just ends up winning by 20 points and the needle isn't moved whatsoever, then what did you accomplish? You didn't get the bill. You didn't get the bill stopped. You couldn't get the main sponsor.
I did get the bill stopped, but yes. Travis, go ahead and then let's move on.
I should know this, and so I feel bad I don't. Did Stephanie Trussell running for that seat? Did she end up throwing her name in for that?
Yeah.
For IL 42.
Yep.
Yeah.
So great, we got a candidate there.
We got a candidate. Now, I mean, again, you're not going to win that district based on the data, but can you move the ball in the right direction, which helps all the Republicans on the ballot? This is a team sport, y'all, so we've got to do better up and down the ballot. It's not just going to be on the statewide candidates to do this. We got to do it locally, too. All right, let me go to our next topic because we're way over and we got some juicy stuff coming up. So, Chris, do this fast here. But the only Republican who's on the Cook County board, Sean Morrison in the 17th district, now has his Democratic challenger. Lyons Township Clerk Elise Hoffenberg is going to be in the race challenging Sean Morrison. Chris, give us a quick primer on this thing. How's Sean going to look in this race?
So, Sean historically has always overperformed the rest of the ticket. His last two races have been extremely close, however. Is Elise Hoffenberg the candidate who's going to beat Sean Morrison? I don't think so. Elise Hoffenberg comes out of the people who I always call like the LaGrange, like progressive mommy groups, like the LaGrange Indivisible, the crazy Marie Newman supporters. That's who Elise Hoffenberg is. Okay. 4 years ago, you had a Italian-American normal Democrat from Orland Park run against Morrison, who got no help from the Cook County Democratic Party, and he almost beat him. It seems like Hoffenberg has a lot of institutional support, but she's like cuckoo bananas progressive. I think she has some like weird baggage in her background, because she originally was going to run against Jim Durkin back in like 2020 or 2018, one or the other, but she dropped out of the race for like a very, very strange reason. This is all online. For anybody who wants to look this up, you can go ahead and do it. But it's a very, very strange reason why she dropped out. But one thing that is for certain is that she comes from a more progressive element of the West Suburban Democratic Party. I think Morrison should be fine running against her. But again, this is a pretty purple district, and you can't take it for granted.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to some of our policy topics. The one that we got to start with is I mean, I feel like we're talking about this every week, but more violence in our politics in the public square. You've got a sniper who opened fire at an ICE facility in Dallas, killing 2 detainees and wounding a third, not even hitting ICE officers, which obviously I don't want them to have hit ICE officers, but this was an anti-ICE based on the engravings on the bullets. This was an anti-ICE thing, and they ended up hitting detainees. It's the opposite of what you're trying to accomplish, which, by the way, is a great metaphor for violence in politics. You tend to accomplish the opposite of what you're trying to accomplish. And we're seeing it here at the Broadview facility in Chicago. You see peaceful protesters, but watch one of those videos and tell me they're peaceful. Oftentimes you're seeing basically rioters there. You're seeing obstruction of law enforcement, assaulting law enforcement. We've seen it. They threw gas cans, rocks, bottles, fireworks, slashed tires of cars, blocked the entrance to the building. And you're seeing candidates, Daniel Biss, Kata Bagazala, Juliana Stratton went and joined. She just spoke. She didn't actually participate like Biss and Abagazala did. But this is continuing this trend. And many of us have said this is the natural end of the rhetoric. I mean, you saw, Newsom calling, ICE authoritarian actions, and then somebody goes and shoots up ICE. Of course, that's how this is going to go. You go convince people.
The code red today or yesterday or something. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem. So
Yeah,
let's start there. And the violence in our politics, of course, Dallas was a horrible situation, but you can't overlook what's happening in Broadview. And I don't know. Let's talk about this. There's a few angles, but I'll just stop there and open it up because violence in our politics is obviously never, ever, ever the answer.
Well, I think one of the things that's important, and I actually sat down with a reporter from St. Louis NPR earlier this week. He asked to meet with me, and he was kind of asking me like what some of my concerns were. And one of the things that I kind of stressed to him was you hear this rhetoric from, Democrats on the national level and even some at the local level. Pritzker wants to think he's national, whether he is or not, who knows? But, they call us Nazis, they call us fascist, this is an authoritarian takeover of our government, all this very extreme rhetoric. And that is a contributing factor to some of this violence that we're seeing, right? Whenever the shooter the assassin or the shooter that shot Charlie Kirk used, language about fascism. Same with this guy that shot up the ICE facility. They're using rhetoric that Democrat leaders are also using. So these reporters, whenever they have an opportunity, they need to be asking these elected officials that are using that kind of language to, they need to hold them accountable for that. Because if they continue talking that way, we're going to continue having problems like this. Because the average voter, the regular person on the street hears that rhetoric and rolls their eyes or understands that it's absurd. But you have a segment of the population that, is not mentally stable or, gravitates towards that language and says, well, if Pritzker says this person's a Nazi, then I'm a hero for doing something about it. And here we are. And I know that there's been Republicans that have said things that they shouldn't have, Trump included, right? But you can't compare, calling somebody corrupt or low IQ or some of the things that Trump says about his opponents to what some of these Democrats are saying about theirs. We're not Nazis. We're not fascist. We're not white supremacists. We disagree with Democratic policies, but we're not those things.
I think that's absolutely right. Scott Adams was talking about this morning on his podcast. If you call somebody stupid or brain dead or whatever Trump said about Kamala Harris recently, that doesn't encourage people to go pick up a gun, right? You start talking people they're going to take away your democracy. They literally are Hitler. They're the worst thing that's ever happened. To an unbalanced mind, that can motivate people. And what did the Dallas shooter apparently do? He was looking up the video of Charlie Kirk's assassination.
Yeah, I mean, and you see how the left is sort of presenting this. So I'm looking at some of the releases by, what is this? 47 congressional, state, and local Chicagoland elected officials denounce violence against peaceful protests at the Broadview ICE facility without provocation. Agents fired tear gas, rubber bullets, pepper balls, aiming at people's heads. Family members and protesters and journalists and elected officials and community managers who were just there expressing their First Amendment rights and being attacked without provocation. And this is how they're spinning it. And I'll be honest, some of the media
article, that's what it sounds like.
And some of the media is just going right along with, by the way, that narrative. I mean, I'm looking at 4, 5, 6 different stories here in a row. I won't read them all for time, but without provocation, one altercation happened. Look at this next one. What ICE, Kat was saying, what ICE just did to me was a violent abuse of power, and they're violating our First Amendment rights. Like, you have a First Amendment right to peacefully protest, but not to attack federal officials and block traffic. You don't have a First Amendment right to that. The Tribune, who continues apparently to go further and further left, which is crazy, but they had something in there about how they're quoting Biss and others about how they just want to intimidate us, and that's why they're doing this. And the last one here, the Daily Northwestern, who said, here, this just killed me. A van arrived and protesters swarmed, and then a tire of the van popped as protesters surrounded it. It's like, hold on, tires don't just pop. The tires were slashed. But this is that, like, just, a tire popped. Like, this is how desperate they are to present this as peaceful protests and angry, mean, Trump-backed ICE agents who just want to take away your First Amendment rights. I mean, the spin is ridiculous. From a spin doctor myself, the spin is ridiculous. If you watch the videos, it does not match the spin.
Wow. A tire popped. Oh, that's rich.
Yeah. Well, that reminds me of the New York Times first headline when Charlie Kirk was assassinated. Conservative provocateur Charlie Kirk killed. I mean, talk about, it's what we, in the language study fields, passive voice, right? Mistakes were made, right?
Yep.
Not somebody did something.
Yep. I mean, you've seen the response. I mean, when you someone mentioned MSNBC, I think it was Michael Pritzker was on there, desperately trying to get attention, but they were trying to get him to say that the ICE raids were breaking the law. They asked him 3 or 4 times, and every time Pritzker had to admit, because he was in the public record, he had to admit that no, actually, they're not breaking the law. That was fun to see Pritzker put on the spot there and have to actually admit the truth for once. But you even saw the Broadview mayor who came out. I mean, she clearly just hates Daniel Biss, but how she's come out and attacked these people for doing this and saying, why don't you we asked you to send your law enforcement, could you send some help and actually help us out? Instead, you're just coming with your campaign protesters and inflaming the situation even more. Like, this is not a Republican saying this. So even people on their side are having to admit that A, they're not breaking the law, and B, could we just tone it down a little bit and do this a little more respectfully, please?
Or if you're really say, let's stop demonizing people, then you proceed immediately to demonize people, and this not even slowing down. It's just utterly ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how much more safe would ICE's job be if they would get complicits from the local law enforcement? If local law enforcement would say, hey, here's the guy you're looking for. Now they don't have to go do these raids anymore. Now there's so much more room for safety. So really, Governor Pritzker ought to be ashamed of himself.
Well, and that was Patrick Sheehan's point. So Sheehan he's done great on his press, by the way. He's really impressed me over the last 6 to 12 months. And he came out with that exact same point, Travis, and he's criticized the governor for comparing ICE to the Gestapo, calling those remarks reckless and inflammatory, and made a very similar point that you made. I mean, it's kudos to him. I wanted to call him out for that in a good way of really shining a spotlight on this, and especially on that language. I mean, again, we talk about how words matter here, and when you compare ICE to the Gestapo, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to be the end result of that?
So this is not a new phenomenon, but it has reached, I think, like a fever pitch recently, because this whole thing changed like 10 years ago, where all of a sudden people on the left started talking about their opponents as evil, right? The Nazi thing gets thrown around, Hitler gets thrown around, but the evil, right? They're really demonizing people. And that change in rhetoric, that shift in rhetoric now gives license to people to say, well, look, it's not one thing about having a political disagreement or a philosophical disagreement. It's now the other side is actually evil. And I am therefore justified in reacting to and being proactive to stamp out the evil. And I agree completely with everybody who's saying it is the rhetoric that is causing all of this.
And to be clear, for a long time in both parties, there were segments who did that. It was never mainstream, but both parties had their groups. I've always hated it when Republicans, there's some who would call Democrats demon rats or whatever they'd say. Like there's segments on both, but it became mainstream for the left. Whenever that was in the very recent past, it became mainstream, and that's contributed heavily to where we are today. And I'm going to give credit, Travis is going to like this, I'm going to give credit to the Dabrowski campaign, holding a press conference in front of that facility. He led the news, led the cycle. He led the other candidates because he said one of his first priorities or his first duty when he becomes governor, he would repeal the sanctuary status across Illinois, repeal the Trust Act. So then the reporters went to all the other candidates and they said, yeah, we agree. That was a great move by the Dabrowski camp to take the lead on this cycle, on this issue. So I like to be fair. That was a really good move by the campaign.
Let's go.
So, I mean, this is an issue we should not be running from. We should absolutely be talking about it, especially if you're a candidate for governor. You've got to be pointing to the hypocrisy of Pritzker and how you would do things differently. So I'm glad to see all the campaigns speaking out, but I thought Ted especially did a great job there.
And respecting the campaign tactics on the left, I just want to say it was hilarious to see Kat absolutely slap Biss on this issue to where she's been out there for like weeks at this point, and like Biss finally shows up. So she was like just making Biss chase her out to Broadview and basically making Biss chase her his entire primary campaign. Collin doesn't believe me that Kat's going to win. I think Kat's going to win the 9th congressional district race, and this is one of the reasons why.
I love how you jump on my
influencer.
I love how Chris jumps on my bandwagon where I was the first to say it. He said I was crazy, but now he thinks he's
That's not true at all. I've been on the Kat bandwagon since day one. I have been Kat's strongest supporter this entire time.
Kat got memed for her flop on the ground there. That meme's gotten, or the GIF has gotten everywhere. So,
she's going to get votes from that, Collin.
You probably raise money on it too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So we always like to equip our audience. So before we close down this topic, let's do this. Let's equip our audience with what's actually happening here. There's been nearly 550 arrests by ICE in Chicago since this surge has started. That's what's been reported. And 50 to 60% of those are targeted arrests, meaning people they specifically were targeting. That's criminals, especially violent criminals. All right, that's something you've got to be pointing out because, of course, that's getting buried. And who are some of those violent criminals? I mean, the biggest story you should be pointing to is the gang member who beat a 21-year-old to death in cold blood, was convicted of murder in 2005, spent 20 years in Statesville Correctional Facility, and then was just let back out on the streets because the state refused to tell ICE, hey, why don't you come pick this dude up? And they refused to work with ICE. So then for the next, I think it was 5 days or so, ICE had to go looking everywhere to find this individual. They finally found them in Elgin. They picked him up. They're going to get rid of him. But this is a very real-life example of the problem. And every time Pritzker says, no, we do coordinate with ICE when it comes to violent criminals, it's a lie. It's always been a lie. And this was a great example of it. They literally could have just passed him off or even said, hey, we're releasing him at this time. Their response was, oh, you could always go on our website to get that information. Like, the reality here is we could all and should all agree, regardless of where you stand on immigration and illegal immigration, we can all agree that violent criminals who are here illegally need to go. Even Democrats publicly say that's true. So this is a great example, and Republicans, if you want to point to the problem in Illinois, this is the kind of story that you need to point to that shows what's actually happening here, because we can all agree that those people who are being targeted, the violent criminals, they got to go. All right, last thing I want to equip our team with, or our audience with, is this. Let's talk about collateral arrests, because you see all the time. Durbin's doing this now. Pritzker's doing it. All the people on the left are doing it. That, oh, they're picking up all these people who don't have criminal records. Let me explain what's happening, because they should not be let off the hook here. The reason why that's happening is called collateral arrest, because Illinois doesn't let law enforcement work with ICE. ICE is having to deploy all these tactics that the left are saying, look, see, those tactics are awful. Well, the only reason they have to do it, as Travis said earlier, is because Illinois does not let law enforcement work with ICE. Don't believe the spin or the hype. It's wrong. They're lying. They do not let law enforcement work with ICE. And so as a result, ICE has to go deploy all these tactics to go find these criminal illegal immigrants, especially those who've committed violent crimes. In the middle of those operations, when they come across illegal immigrants who don't have criminal records, they have to follow federal law, and federal law says they need to be detained and deported. So they have to detain those individuals. They have to deport those individuals. That's called collateral arrests. If Pritzker and Durbin and all these Democrats in Illinois actually wanted to stop the terror that they're talking about, then they would actually work with ICE to identify, detain, and deport these criminal illegal immigrants. And then you wouldn't see these collateral arrests. That's what we're seeing in other states that aren't actively trying to create these situations for political gain. That's what they're doing. They want the terror. They want the fear. They want whole communities bunkered down because now they think they can get every vote out of that community. Democrats want this. They could stop it. These collateral arrests are their fault, and Republicans do not let them get away with that talking point because it is not our fault. It is theirs. This could all be avoided. Travis, I think you made that point really well earlier.
Louder for the people in the back, man. You are just nailing it on that one. So good. You're right.
And I think I want to end with this. I want to point to one story that was in the Daily Herald where West Chicago Elementary District 33, school principals were reporting that buses were running half full on this past Tuesday. They had 15 to 25% absenteeism. And what they were hearing back from people was they were afraid of leaving their homes. Right? This is a very real thing. You've got people afraid to leave their homes, kids afraid to go to school, parents afraid to send their kids to school. That is the very real fear that Democrats are intentionally creating to win an election. Democrats don't care how many people they hurt as long as they win the next election, and Republicans need to seize on this because Democrats can't own caring. We can't keep letting them own caring. They are hurting and scaring entire communities, and now there are kids who aren't even going to school because of these Democratic tactics. We've got to call them out on it. It's got to stop because kids are being hurt. That cannot be okay. All right, let's go to our next topic here. Let me scroll down. All right, let's talk about this. So this week, J.B. Pritzker came out and said that every department, almost every department in his administration needs to identify up to 4% in savings because Donald Trump is ruining the economy, ruining Illinois. He's the reason that Illinois has been running deficits and struggling for like a decade. Donald Trump is the reason the last 6 months He created all the economic and fiscal problems in Illinois that have existed for a very long time. It's all Trump's fault. It's obviously a very transparent tactic here. Obviously, Curran, McCombie, and many others have called him out for this. But this is a tactic that Pritzker has been using, and we've been warning people that he would be doing this. That the whole goal here was to set it all up so that all of Illinois' fiscal problems were Trump's fault. And many members of the media, not all, and I'll point to one who's really called this out, but many members of the media have been just going along with this. And it's going to let Pritzker and the Democrats off the hook for years and years and years of tax and spend policies that have not worked in Illinois. We didn't get to 50th on almost every economic and fiscal indicator in the last 8 months. We've been there for a long time under J.B. Pritzker's administration. So we can't let him get away with this. You've got to point out just how obvious this tactic is. I'll start with you, Travis, since you serve in the General Assembly. Does it drive you crazy since you've been calling out Pritzker and the Democrats for overspending that now he's trying to flip the script here?
Well, I'd love to know where this savings is going to come from, because every single year that I've been in office, we've raised taxes. So you're telling me that there's cuts that are available, you just haven't been wanting to use them and instead would rather raise tax on everybody? So that doesn't make any sense. And to your point, we have the worst credit rating in the nation, and we have had the worst credit rating in the nation for the last decade. We've got $180 billion in unfunded pension liability, the most in the nation for a long time. So spare me, seriously. I mean, this is like obviously such a political ploy, but one thing you know about J.B. Pritzker, he'd rather have a political win or a political message than actually help people. We saw this most recently, kind of related to ICE, with the National Guard coming in. What happened in D.C.? They're loving it. What's going to happen in New Orleans? It's going to be effective. What's going to be happening in Memphis? It's going to be effective. What happened in Chicago? We missed the opportunity because J.B. Pritzker would rather have a political victory than an actual win for his people. And so here we are once again. Let Donald Trump be your Trojan horse, because I'm coming for your pocket.
Yeah. And I think
months ago, when people were considering what is Pritzker could even run, because he's going to be a sitting governor running for president, saddled with all the economic problems of the state. And so he chose to stay being a governor, I think. Probably the right decision for him, because that lets him run still as a sitting governor, right? But yeah, he's got to figure out a way to shift blame, and it's all pointing at Trump. Yeah. It's a pretty simple script, really.
I mentioned one reporter who's been doing this well. Let me give him kudos, Patrick Finkston. He has, and not just recently, he's been doing this ever since Pritzker started this tactic, pointing out that the problems existed well before Trump took office. He did it again this week, and I want to give him credit for it. He pointed out in a piece this week that the state's revenue questions dated back to last November, before the actual 2024 president election, when COGVA came out and said that there's going to be a $3 billion shortfall. This is not a new thing. And yet, what did Democrats do? They passed a $55.2 billion budget, $2 billion more than the year prior. So they knew that we had a fiscal problem, just like they've known every year prior, and yet they still raise spending, they still increase taxes, not even to the level of their new spending. So kudos to Finkston for pointing this out. I know we had Tom Demmer on, who's a great spokesperson for conservative policy in Illinois, and Demmer did a great job laying this out about how we've had budget deficits. What did he say here? Let me get this right. An average budget deficit of $4.6 billion over 5 years. Actually, I think that was Curran, but and then Demmer came in and backed that up, and he pointed out how we've been in a dire financial situation for a long time in this state. And I'm missing some of the quotes because I'm trying to do this too fast. But Demmer did a great job, and I'm sorry I'm not doing him credit. The last thing that was called out, even by some reporters, was, why are you doing this as an executive order? Like, you could just do this as a memo to your administration. It's clearly, obviously political when you do it as an executive order. You're just looking for press. That's all this is. This is another situation where Pritzker's just looking for a chance to get some press, looking for some cover for his fiscal mismanagement. And he has tried this before. People forget he tried this back in 2020. So this isn't the first time Pritzker has tried this. It's not a new tactic by him.
Well, he could fix the out-migration from Illinois by issuing an executive order.
One thing we could fix, this just came out recently, Auditor General identified that at Department of Corrections, people are claiming time and a half payment on days when they're also taking paid leave.
Yep.
I don't even know how that's possible. The cost is $150 million. That is one of Governor J.B. Pritzker's administrative agencies that he's mismanaging into the ground. And it's not Donald Trump's fault that he's paying people double overtime on days that they have paid leave.
Yeah.
That should be theft.
Yeah.
Collin, Butler and I are going to need a restructuring of our contract to make sure we are eligible for that type of benefit. Or I'm just going to have to go work for the state of Illinois. It seems like the benefits over there are fantastic. Will I ever get a pension from that system? Probably not. But I'm not getting one here either. So you know what? I'll take my time. I'll take my time and a half and paid leave on the same day with the state.
Well, and I gave Ted some credit for the immigration issue. I'll give Darren Bailey and his campaign credit here. They came out with a great statement and did it fast. So it was good, rapid response by their team, and came out with a really strong statement pushing back. I'm going to jokingly ding him a little bit. This quote, to blame President Trump for Illinois' budget problems is like blaming the White Sox losing record on the fans. I mean, listen, don't kick we White Sox while we're down. Could you just have a little bit of like compassion for how hard it is to be a White Sox fan right now? But joking aside, it was a great press release and a great statement pushed out by Darren Bailey and his team, and I love to see the pushback. We're finally starting to see some pushback. You've got Curran and McCombie, you've got these gubernatorial candidates who are pushing back and getting a little bit of press doing so. This is what we need to do in Illinois, so I love to see it. All right, let's do this. I know we've got two guests who haven't been with us to be able to talk about their thoughts on the Charlie Kirk assassination. So we're going to bring that up with the context of this. Last Friday, in the U.S. House of Representatives, there was a resolution brought up to condemn Charlie Kirk's assassination, and 7 Illinois Democrats voted no on that resolution. I'm going to read them off. The no votes were Lauren Underwood, Delia Ramirez, Mike Quigley, Roger Krishnan-Northey, Robin Kelly, Jonathan Jackson, and Danny Davis. The did not votes were Sean Casten, Chewy Garcia, and Jan Schakowsky. So here we've got a situation.
Did Schneider vote for it? Did Brad Schneider?
The 4 that voted for it were Budzinski, Foster, Schneider, and Sorensen.
All right, well, for them.
So here's the deal. When there was attacks on Democratic Minnesota lawmakers and a resolution was brought up to condemn that, it passed 424-0. Not a single Republican voted against it. And in fact, all 3 Illinois Republican congresspeople voted for that resolution. And yet here we go. We've got now attack on the right, and Democrats can't bring themselves to vote for it. A majority of the Democratic caucus either voted against it or didn't vote. This is the difference. Republicans, when there's violence, we stand arm in arm and say that's not okay. Democrats, there's violence against the right. Over half of them couldn't even bring themselves to say that that's not right. That is a problem. So thoughts on that, or just your thoughts on, obviously I know Travis and Larry haven't been here to talk about Charlie Kirk. Feel free to jump in with your thoughts there if you'd like as well.
Man, it's still tough to talk about him. I mean, I never met him, but I grew up with him. He was 31, I'm 33. He had a wife and 2 kids. I just got married. It hit me a lot harder than I expected it to. And now looking back on his videos, man, isn't it just like, you don't know what you got till it's gone. Like I always liked him. I always appreciated him. I spent days watching his old videos, man, and like the way he can just pick people apart and also like do it with like a smile on his face. And all these people that vilify him, that he was this evil guy, all these people that he would disagree with, he was kind of ripping them. He was joking with them. He'd say, "Thank you for coming up. I hope you have a great day. God bless you." And so he was a really special guy. But the thing that's been sticking with me are 2 things. Number one, he left a huge void behind him. There's a big gap to fill. Nobody can fill that gap. Nobody. So we all have to decide, what am I going to do to carry a little bit of the weight to make up for the burden that he left behind? That's number one. Number 2, Charlie said, courage and cowardice are both contagious. Pick which one you want to spread. And I want to spread courage, and I want to pick up that a little bit. I can't replace Charlie, but I can do just a little bit to fill that gap. And that's what I think that we're all called to do.
Yeah, I think that's very well spoken. I mean, I still feel just a profound sense of loss. I did know Charlie. I didn't know him very well, but he came to some Federation events. He spoke at local township meetings. I remember one up at for Fremont Township. We did it at the Cove, the swimming place or something.
Yeah,
he had such a magnetic personality in person, and like you, Travis, I actually spent probably the last 6 months watching videos of Charlie because they just started popping, up on my Facebook feed, because whatever you look at on Facebook, you get more of it, right? And now it was just inundating. And like you, I just looked at it. I was in awe. I mean, I argue for a living. but Charlie just had this skill as a debater to very matter-of-factly get right to the issue and take apart assumptions that these people would come in with. They go, well, wait a minute, you're assuming this. You're just going through. You're bringing your prejudices with you. And Charlie, I think, had no prejudices. He tried to unpack all these assumptions that people brought with them. And I think, at least in some cases, he did change some minds and he did make people think. And I think he did it with a smile, right? And a little smirk. And I think the attacks that he has suffered after his death are just massively unfair. And I think 99% of it is people who have not watched what Charlie said. It's what other people are saying that Charlie said, right? And they're cherry picking little bitty things. Matter of fact, I think Turning Point will continue. I think we're all going to pick up some piece of what Charlie did. But just today on his radio show, I was listening in, and his crew was there, right? And they're like, "Look, we're gonna pick up this. We're gonna keep going. His widow's gonna keep going." And today's show was focused on picking apart those unfair allegations about what Charlie's beliefs were. So I'm very optimistic it will go on.
Well, and the thing that kept going through my mind, and still today is going through my mind, is you watch the difference in response. I mean, look at all these vigils. They're peaceful. People are praying, hugging each other, holding up candles. Like, this is what we do when Charlie died. And when somebody on the left dies, it's cities are burning and we're rioting. But look at some of the responses. Even just in the last week, I clipped some of these. You had Eric Sorensen on social media saying, "Sorry, the Turning Point didn't last longer for you." I mean, this is a sitting congressman who's saying this. You had a candidate in the 9th District, Bethany Johnson, who, after Kirk was shot, she shared it and said, "Gosh, must be rough." And then when she was asked about it by the media, she said, "Oh yeah, I feel bad for Charlie Kirk's family, but I also felt bad for them when he was alive because they had to have Charlie Kirk as part of their family." Like, this is what they're saying after somebody was assassinated politically. We see it in District 300, the school board president there refusing to apologize because she said, when she heard the story, it was, man, karma, it's a bitch when she saw this happen. And the people are there up in arms because she continues to sort of push that narrative and refuses to apologize. I kind of a little bit can follow when somebody in the heat of the moment maybe says something that they shouldn't have said. And I respect when they come back and say, I was wrong, I apologize. But here we have two instances of people who were called out for it and didn't say, yeah, that wasn't the best thing that I said. They doubled down on it. And that's, again, how we are not the same. They doubled down on that rhetoric. They doubled down on the hate. And yet we're supposedly the hate-filled ones. I mean, there was the Charlie Kirk vigil in Boston, where one of the protesters wiped his ass with the American flag and then threw it at the supporters who were there mourning Charlie Kirk's death. Like, we are not the same. When that's your response, when your response to this is to mock those people who are just at that vigil peacefully, wipe your rear end with the American flag, like, we are not the same. And I'm proudly on the side that's not going to do that. Like, I think as you watch this unfold, we're going to talk about this in the next topic. When you watch this unfold and you see how the two sides are reacting, if you're just sort of the average Republican, or I'm sorry, the average American, you're like, okay, which side am I going to align with? The side that's peaceful and respectful, or the one that's wiping their rear end with the American flag and spreading hate and awful rhetoric? Like, that is not a good look for the left as they continue on with these tactics.
Well, the really scary part is the number of people in education that exhibit that behavior. You want these people teaching your kids? I don't.
No. And I think the other thing, too, is you've got Crystal Lake. These tactics aren't just about Charlie Kirk. This is how the left operates. One of you guys brought this up earlier in the podcast, but the Crystal Lake Park Board president now wears a bulletproof vest to the meetings because people are heckling and yelling and making personal jabs and booing and raising their middle finger at him. It's like, this was a duly elected board. They now have the majority 4-3, and they're making changes that they want to see. And because residents don't like it, they're literally getting to the point of being this close to violence, where now they have to install extra safety. They have to put they were putting up metal detectors. Like, this is where we're at a park district board. This is where our politics is, where if the left doesn't like that you're making changes when you were duly elected to do so, they can resort to any tactic that they want. And it's scary. It's a problem.
Enabled them and told them that this is okay.
Yeah,
that's the real tragedy here.
Yeah. I think, man, we just got to keep shining the light and being an example. When Erica Kirk said, "I choose to forgive," That to me, man, that is an example of how you want to live your life. That is what Charlie would have wanted for her and for all of us. And so when you hear
I couldn't
these
have done
things
that.
about like about how some on the left are acting so poorly, we got to condemn it, no doubt. But to me, it's like rise above, be an example, shine the light. Because to Colin's point, well, first of all, it's the right thing to do. Second of all, because people watch that and they see it and that they say, look, I see good people over here. That is so attractive, man. And for the long-term growth of our party and our cause and our mission and our values, doing the right thing is just the right thing.
It's always, what is it? It's always a good time to do the right thing. Isn't that the quote?
I like it.
All right, and it should be no wonder then. Let's go to our last topic before we start to close this down. It should be no wonder that Gen Z males are trending strongly towards Republicans. There was a great story in The Hill based on some data from Decision Desk HQ, which talked about how Gen Z is charting a much different course than my generation, millennials, have been charting. And they're showing, and I'll read some of the data here, about how, especially amongst Gen Z, you see a significant trend towards Republicans and conservatives, especially amongst young males. But it's not just males, by the way. They gave some data even on some females that have changed and some minority demographics that have changed. But the biggest movement here, Democratic registration amongst young women stayed pretty consistent at 47% over the last, I think this is a last couple of years and into the last cycle. Meanwhile, Democratic registration amongst young white men, which is historically around 49%, fell to 29%. When you look at young non-white women, the registration numbers from a decade ago were about 80% for Democrats. It's now 75%, so a 5% drop. But here's the big change, 66% amongst non-white men, and that's now down to 54%. And there's a couple other data points here. I'll do this quickly. But there was a poll done by a political firm that I think leans pretty left, where they tested people between the age of 18 and 29. And they found that young women are voting Democratic on the generic ballot, 66 to 24. But amongst young men, it's actually Republican, 48 to 42. And I've been doing politics a long time. I can't tell you the last time that I saw amongst young voters any demographic that skewed towards Republican. The old mantra was always, once they pay their first property tax bill, an income tax bill, they'll become Republican fiscally. Once they have their first kid, they'll become Republican socially. Like that was always the idea of let them be, crazy far left when they're young, they'll come home in their middle ages. But we're seeing even young people, 18 to 29, especially young men, are starting to move towards Republicans. And is there any wonder why, based on our previous topic?
All right. And what as a young man, what does the Democrat Party tell you? You're toxic. You're bad. This is all your fault, right? You need to change who you are. And the Republican message is completely the opposite.
I'm so optimistic. It's good for our party, but oh my gosh, even more than that, it's so good for society. Because what we desperately need is young men who are stepping up to lead and champion their families. The number one problem that we have in this country is a lack of dads in the home. And so we try to throw money at our problems. We need more police. We need more for school. We need more for roads. And all of those are tangential to the fact that we need to have dads at home that are raising their kids and to have good moral character. And so, yeah, I'm excited about having them come home to the party. But man, the fact that young men are getting more engaged in their faith and the fact that they even care about politics and want to get involved, to me, look, I'll take the Republican win. But what I'm more optimistic about is just the fabric of our society when men are doing what we're supposed to do of leading our families, being present, pouring into our kids, loving our spouse. That's got me, I'm jazzed up about it.
Yeah.
And Charlie Kirk gets a lot of credit for that, which is why it's so
Totally
around that work.
Yeah, let me share one data point, and then we'll let poor Chris finally actually speak. But I want to, Lane will bring this up on screen and post. But one of the last things that I saw from Charlie Kirk that I actually screenshot even before the assassination, and I've been looking for a chance to talk about this because the data point is crazy and interesting. I now finally have a chance here to bring this up. There was a study done by NBC News where they asked Gen Z, what's most important to you and what's your definition of success? And when they tested Gen Z voters who voted for Trump, the top items were having children, financial independence, a fulfilling job and career, being married, having money to do what you want, owning your own house, being grounded spiritually, making your family and community proud, having no debt. When they asked women who voted for Harris that same question, it was a fulfilling job and career, having money to do what you want, having emotional stability. You had to go all the way down to the bottom to see only 6% of young women who voted for Harris said having children, being married. You see such a difference, and I don't know if I've seen this, between males and females lately in our polling. When we test issues, there's limited difference between males and females overall, which is a new phenomenon. We used to see a much bigger gap. When you look amongst Gen Z voters, there is a gigantic gap between how males think and how females think. And again, Lane will bring it up on screen again if you didn't catch it the first time if you're watching this. But this is instructional if you're doing any sort of political outreach to young voters. All right, Chris, go.
Look, I'm the only Gen Z male on this podcast.
Michael's not Gen Z?
Yeah, I'm Gen Z, 1999.
No, is it Michael Gen Z?
No, he's a millennial. Millennial cuts off. Yeah, he's a millennial. Okay. So I'm the only Gen Z male on this podcast. I'm friends with other Gen Z males, and I can confirm anecdotally that, yes, I have friends. I'm sorry to burst all your guys' bubbles, but anecdotally, I can confirm this data, is that young men of my age who I am friends with are much more conservative than previous generations, and they seem to get more and more conservative with every passing year. But the Republican Party needs to understand that these voters aren't conservative in the same way that you guys are conservatives. They don't view the Republican Party necessarily favorably. They are traditional. They are conservative. They have strong opinions on a wide variety of issues, but that doesn't necessarily translate to them showing up in elections to vote Republican, because they view the Republican Party with as much suspicion, if not more suspicion, than the Democratic Party because of certain issues. They don't want to hear over and over and over again about taxes and the economy and all that stuff. While important to us, we're more so concerned with the long-term viability of this country, whether or not we're going to be able to have a family, whether or not this country is going to exist in another 20 years. That's the concerns of the Gen Z male. And you cannot simply assume that they're going to fall in line behind your individual Republican candidate in District 142 or whatever you think is going on here. No, the Gen Z conservative male is much more fascinating politically and doesn't necessarily fit in the Republican box as cleanly as a lot of commentators, not saying anybody on this podcast, but a lot of commentators think they are. It requires a lot more work and a lot more outreach to understand what my generation, male, female, what have you, genuinely cares about. It manifests itself in candidates like Trump for the Republican Party, because a lot of Gen Z males like Trump. And for women and Gen Z progressives, it manifests itself in candidates like Kat Abu-Ghazala and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, more of the fringiest elements of politics, because my generation, left and right, is very existentially distraught about this country. And that's why you see them migrate towards the fringes of politics, because we don't fit into the box. They don't fit into the box. And the Republican Party needs to understand that if it actually wants my generation to vote for them.
Chris, let me back that up. So in this article, the pollster that I mentioned, Tulchin, they did some, it might be Tolkien, I don't know him, so I might have said that wrong, but they actually did some message testing, and he put in this article a quote on a test, a message that they used that worked really well to move those young Gen Z male voters over to the Democratic Party, and it backs up what you're saying. Here's that message that worked for them really well. It hit Trump and Republicans on making it harder for young people to succeed, that the costly tariffs and reckless policies that are killing good jobs and driving up prices on basic goods like food, cars, and computers is making it harder for people to pay their student loans, buy their first home, start a business, or start a family. They used that message, and it worked really well to potentially move those voters left of center instead of right of center. So that backs up, Chris, what you're saying, that this isn't the sort of traditional Republican narrative that we always hear. This is that future-looking, I'd like to have a career, start a family, buy a home, pay off my student loans, things that Republicans don't tend to talk about but should be talking about. So that very much backs up what you just talked about, Chris.
I just encourage all the Republicans out there. It's great to say things like the young people are waking up, or the Hispanic community is waking up, or the Asian community is waking up and they're voting more Republican than ever. And listen, that's great if you're a Republican, but you have to understand that just because those numbers have moved in such a direction because of Donald Trump in one election, that doesn't mean that they're going to be showing up for you in the year 2026. You have to make it worth their while to show up and vote for your candidate, because if they smell that you're disingenuous, they're not going to vote for you.
Yeah. Let me jump us over because we're running out of time. Let's do our news you can use. I'll do this pretty quickly, but you guys are welcome to jump in with thoughts on each topic if you'd like. First one here, I missed this, but Pat Sheehan, again, give him kudos. He brought this to my attention, as did Sharon Langlotch Johnson, who've both been on the podcast. They brought this to my attention. I missed it. Where Brandon Johnson called law enforcement a sickness. And I know we can take quotes out of context. So let me give you his full quote, and you tell me if this is actually out of context. Johnson said, jails and incarceration and law enforcement is a sickness that has not led to safe communities. So we're not taking him out of context when he says that law enforcement is a sickness. Republicans should be shining a spotlight on this quote because Johnson is going straight back to his anti-police rhetoric. And this does not play in a lot of places in the state of Illinois, and we should be pointing it out. I'll give the final. Oh, go ahead.
Chicago either.
Yeah, especially in minority communities that actually want some help. They want some safety. They want safe neighborhoods. I don't see this playing.
Favorability at like 20% now.
Yeah, I mean, depending on the poll, some of them had it at like 6 or 8%.
Yeah, 20 is high.
Yeah, exactly. But we should be, if you're a Republican, again, part of the point of this podcast is to equip you. This quote should be in your text messages, your social media, your email to fundraise. Put this out and use this to fundraise. The left is so good at this. When a Republican says something dumb or a conservative says something dumb, they put it in their fundraising and they raise a bunch of money off of it. That Brandon Johnson quote should be used in fundraising all across the state to raise money from our grassroots because nobody is going to agree with that quote. It is as far left comes.
And then the other thing they do, Collin, and you know this, they ask every other candidate, well, what do you think about what this person said?
Yep. We should be asking our Democratic opponents, do you agree with Brandon Johnson that law enforcement is a sickness? Put them on the record. So you're right, Larry. Next one here. Travis said this a bit earlier, but just in case you're clicking straight to this topic in our podcast, I'm going to say it again real quickly. Pritzker's Department of Corrections has yet again been caught by the Auditor General every week we've got a topic of how the great administrator, J.B. Pritzker, is doing a horrible job running government in this state. And as Travis said, here's what they're doing. They're letting Department of Corrections employees take a day off, use one of their sick days or their off days of paid leave, and then come into work, and now they're getting overtime for the hours that they're working. It's absolutely costing a significant amount of money. The report doesn't specifically say how much, but when you talk about how much overtime is being spent in the Department of Corrections, it's over $150 million last year. You want to talk about why we've got spending problems and why we've got fiscal problems in this state. Maybe if J.B. Pritzker would actually do a better job running the state, we wouldn't have so many problems. All right, going to the next one here. An economist, actually several, but an economist has been highlighted, and I'll give Capital Facts credit for this. They did post this, where the Economist came out and claimed that there are 21 states plus District of Columbia that are either in or at high risk of recession, and Illinois was in that list. This is no surprise to any of us who've been pointing out the horrible economic statistics in this state, but now we've got economists who are pointing out we're either in a recession already in Illinois or we're at high risk to be in one very, very soon. That's how bad the economy is in Illinois. This is a problem. We need to do something about it, I would think.
And I think it comes up all back to energy costs. I mean, we're crippling businesses. I just live in a small 2-bedroom apartment, and my energy costs are 30% more than they were last summer. They're the highest I've ever had in my life. And so where are our jobs coming from? High wage manufacturing companies. And when a company moved to Illinois 20 or 30 years ago because we have competitive energy, and now we don't, what do you think is going to happen? They're either moving or they're laying off workers because you can't just not have the factory anymore.
Yeah, and Travis,
how much of every gallon of gas goes to the state?
Well, there's the double tax on gas. Yeah, I mean, there's the double tax on gas. But Travis is right. I've seen Tony McCombie and the House Republicans and others who've pointed out that energy is going to be a big focus, and it should be. So I love it for Republicans because you've got people who've seen their electricity rates double. And there's one of the few advantages in Illinois. We don't have a lot, but when it comes to economic development, one of the few advantages that we have had for years is our energy sector. It's good, cheap, reliable energy. That's been one of the few things that we could sell businesses on, and we are losing that competitive advantage, and it's one of the few we've got.
Yeah, so stuff you can use for your listeners. This is a stat I use all the time. When J.B. Pritzker came into office, Illinois had the 27th most affordable power in the country. Today, we have the 36th most affordable power in the country. So every single year he's been in office, a state and a half have jumped us. Think about if that went the other way. If we were jumping a state and a half, and today we had the 17th most affordable, how great would that be? You could say, look, our workers' comp is bad, and our property taxes are bad. But hey, I'm going to locate in Illinois because the power is so affordable. We're going the exact opposite direction. A state and a half every year leaps us.
Yeah. Travis understood the assignment and came with information for our audience. Well done, my friend. All right, let's go to the next topic. So I love talking BIPA. It's above people's heads, and I get that. But the Biometric Information and Privacy Act, people need to be paying more attention to it. And we see yet again, it's in the news, and it's probably going to come up during veto session in a couple of weeks because there are a number of people who have pointed out, and this isn't just conservatives, this is union leaders, this is tech company representatives who have pointed out that BIPA specifically is hurting our ability to attract data centers to Illinois. And JB Pritzker has put a lot of his economic chips, his economic development chips into data centers. And here's a scary stat. If you look at how Chicago ranked in North America for total data center capacity from 2017 to 2022 and now into 2025, what you'll see is that from 2017 to 2022, we were second or third in North America. Now, here are the numbers. Starting in 2019, we're second, and then second. Now in 2021, third. Now in 2023, we're fourth. 2024, we're fifth. 2025, so far, we're seventh. Every year or every other year, we are losing ground to the rest of the country. And one of the major reasons for that is BIPA, is this horrible piece of legislation that's letting trial lawyers make tons and tons of money off of businesses. And it is hurting our ability to attract data centers, which I think JB Pritzker should probably do something about, considering that's like one of the few areas he's actually pushing economic development.
Hey, I got $32 this week from Facebook because of this law.
Oh, there you go, Michael.
So I guess I'm part of the problem.
You're winning, I guess. But pay attention to BIPA. It's going to come up during veto session, so I'm not the only nerd looking at that issue. It's going to come up, I promise. All right, last one here. Lane will bring up this image on screen. Mover data is showing that people are fleeing blue states like Illinois. This is common sense. I get it, but we have to keep reminding people, since Governor Gaslight and his allies are telling us, no, we're not losing anybody in Illinois. Look at this first map as Lane, our producer, brings it up for those who are watching this. You see people who are fleeing California, fleeing New York, fleeing Illinois. I mean, look specifically at the Midwest. It's all people leaving Illinois, going to these other states, which Travis said it earlier. We should not be losing to Indiana, to Wisconsin, to Iowa, to Missouri. We shouldn't be losing to Tennessee. Like, if we're in a reality where Illinois is less attractive to people than these states, we are doing it wrong. There's a second map I'll have Lane bring up that even shows it even better, just how many people are fleeing these blue states. It's real. It's a real stat. And yeah, it's great talking point, but it hurts Illinois when we lose these people out of our state. The rest of us who are stuck here are still stuck paying the bills. So that's why our cost of living keeps going up higher and higher. All right, that's it. We're through our topics. Let's get to our closing topics here. Have a little fun. Our OGs and clowns of the week. What do you guys got? You guys got any positivity you want to bring this week, or any shade you want to throw? Here's your chance to do it.
I'm curious to see who's going to win in the ultimate anti-Trump contest, Gavin Newsom or JB Pritzker. I give the edge to Newsom. He talks with the hands. He's got the hands going on. He's got the this, the that. But we'll see. I mean, I think it's going to be a race to the bottom, and it's going to get. I mean, how many times can Pritzker compare Republicans to, totalitarians and Nazis and everything else? Gavin's seems to have a broader palette to talk about.
A little bit. I mean, listen, you talk energy. They just put forward a package that for California that Newsom signed was actually kind of, again, for California, was a little bit balanced. You'd never see that pass in Illinois.
I kept hearing that California is getting a little redder, so we'll see what happens.
What do you guys got for clowns and OGs? Come on, let's have some fun.
So my OG, I'm going to harken back to somebody I brought up earlier, Erica Kirk. The girl is just like, I can't imagine what she's going through. Then she gives this powerful speech. She takes over Turning Point. I can't imagine what she's going through, and she is just leading like it's nobody's business. So she's total OG. Clown, you mentioned it, Larry, Gavin Newsom. I mean, the guy this week says he's confident that there will not be a legitimate election in 2028. Well, here we are in 2025, and things seem to be generally working out okay. There's no dictator. I know, as much as they like to believe it, there's no kings around here. So, I mean, talk about scare tactics.
Then, if you're Gavin Newsom, if there's not going to be an election, right?
Yeah, that's right. Relax.
That's a good one. All right, what else you guys got?
I have three clowns of the week, all very controversial, so I'm going to get myself in trouble this
All
week,
right, I like it.
just like Collin wants. My first clown of the week is the United Nations. The UN was in session this week, and they decided to roll out the red carpet, almost literally, for the new Syrian president al-Jilani, who is a former member of al-Qaeda and a former member of ISIS, but he's out there speaking at the UN. He actually did a sit-down with the former CIA director who had a $10 million bounty on his head when he was, again, a member of ISIS, a member of al-Qaeda. So they're just rolling out members for the red carpet for jihadists now at the UN, so that's always clown-worthy. My second clown, now before everybody jumps on me, hear me out. My second clown of the week is President Trump. He went last at Charlie Clerk's memorial, which I think everybody basically said it was a bad idea. Erica should have went last. I don't know why they had Trump go last. But in Trump's speech, he said that, Charlie Kirk loved his enemies. I don't. I hate my enemies. I want what's worst for them. I think it's very wrong to say such a thing at this time in politics. I think it's a terrible thing to say at a man's memorial. So Trump is a clown of the week for saying that he hates his enemies. I think we should be embracing Christian love and not rejecting it. And the third clown of the week, which is a little bit more in the news right now, and I'm going to get really in trouble for this one. He's not watching, but the final clown of the week is the Cardinal, Archbishop of Chicago, Blaise Supich, because he has doubled down on his insistence that he is going to give an award to Senator Dick Durbin over Durbin's support for immigration rights in the United States. Now, listen, if Senator Durbin was only be given an award because he supported immigration rights, that'd be one thing. But as so many other bishops around the country and so many other commentators have pointed out, Dick Durbin does not believe in pretty much anything else that the Catholic Church preaches on political issues, namely on abortion. Dick Durbin has been one of the most prolific supporters of abortion in the United States, and it would be probably a very bad idea for the Archdiocese of Chicago to bestow an award upon him, even if he happened to follow the church's teaching on one particular element of the issue. And my OG of the week goes to the Bishop of Springfield, Bishop Paprocki, who is actually Dick Durbin's bishop, when all things are considered, for calling the cardinal out on this and saying, please do not do this, because this would be a very bad idea because of Dick Durbin's position on a number of issues. I echo Bishop Paprocki's claims, and I please ask the cardinal for mercy that he does not excommunicate me before his resignation is accepted by the Pope. Thank you very much.
Chris, I don't think I've ever heard somebody say that they're a prolific supporter of abortion. Can you be prolific about abortion?
Yeah.
Chris, I actually don't think that's why you're going to get excommunicated. I think the reason you're going to get excommunicated is you don't have an OG this week. You don't have a specific Catholic OG this week. Maybe a Sister Jean who
you're right. Sister
announced
Jean.
her retirement at 106
right.
years old. I feel like she's
didn't know
OG
that.
worthy for you.
That's right. I literally went to Loyola. And
you didn't make her your OG? Like, I'm calling you out here, buddy.
I was too mad at the UN, Trump, and the Cardinal to even think about Sister Jean this week. Collin, thank you for saving my ass yet again. What would I do without you?
Michael, do you have anybody?
I feel like a lot of the ones.
You don't have to fake it. It's all right. We're over
it's
time.
all right.
I mean,
Brandon Johnson on the sickness thing with law enforcement, that was absurd. I saw a lot of my friends that are in law enforcement post that, and very aggravated, understandably so. So you got it. I mean, Brandon Johnson's always going to be clown of the week.
Yeah. All right, let me give mine quickly so we can get our guests on with their lives. My OG is actually not even my OG. My wife Abby has submitted this, but it is Fat Bear Week, which is actually a lot of fun if you look this up. You see Chonk and some of these fat bears. I'll have Lane bring up the image. It's pretty hilarious. So she doesn't know who to make her OG, maybe America, just for this idea. But it's Fat Bear Week, so have some fun with that. And my wife gets an OG nomination because she's my wife and she gets whatever she wants. And all right, my clowns, I've got 3. This one's okay, stick with me. Kind of like Chris. Give me a second here. So my first clown of the week is the epidemic of low expectations in the state of Illinois. So there was a story about how for the 7th straight year, the University of Illinois Springfield was ranked the top regional public university in Illinois by U.S. News and World Report. This is good. But then here's the next line. They placed 10th amongst public regional universities in the Midwest. In the Midwest. And people were cheering this, and I look at it and say, seriously? In the state like Illinois, where Travis said earlier, he's right. We have tremendous education, especially secondary education blanking on the term because I'm on the spot here, but we have tremendous institutions in this state, and we're celebrating that in the West, in the Midwest, our best regional university gotten 10th in the Midwest behind Indiana universities. There was one, I think, in Missouri. Like, that's who we're losing to. Could we please have higher expectations in this state? Could we stop celebrating being 10th and maybe shoot for something better than that? I am sick and tired of living in a state that's okay being just okay. So that's my first clown of the week, is the low expectations we have in this state. We can do better. Second clown is, again, I'll get myself in trouble, but the three-headed eagle allowance had the Oath Keeper founder out. It was a whole problem. Democrats were able to point it out, just like last week when I pointed out how there were Republicans who were celebrating Proud Boys coming out and supporting our candidates and our causes. Like, bringing out the Oath Keeper founder to speak at our events, it hurts every Republican on the ballot. Please stop doing stupid things like this. The last thing I'll say is this one, is I won't say the name because I don't want to, whatever, but there was an individual who started a fake thing that went viral about how Starbucks supposedly wrote "loser" on a coffee cup, and then it was proven not to be true, that it was fake. Could you stop doing stuff like this? This grifter who just wants to get money off Facebook because they make money off of activity because they've monetized it. Okay, that's fine, but there are enough stupid things the left is doing related to Charlie Kirk. You don't need to make something up so you can personally become famous on the Charlie Kirk assassination. Stop doing stupid things like that. There's enough real things we can talk about, but don't make it about you and your Facebook stats. Make it about something bigger than that, because it is bigger than that. With that, we'll go to our closing statements. We'll let our guests go last here. So, I don't know, Michael, you go first. Chris brought a little more heat than you did this week.
All right. I'm just gonna keep saying it until I guess until it happens. Is anybody running for treasurer? Maybe we're gonna have Larry run. You want to?
Larry would make a great Illinois treasurer.
I went to law school because I said there'd be no math. You don't want me as the treasurer.
Hey, you'd be better. Any Republican is better at math than a Democrat, so you probably have an upper hand there. At least we know how to balance things.
Oh, man. All right, Chris, what do you got?
Well, guys, we're coming up on the end of petition season here. Next week, it'll be October, and that means it's the same months that petitions are going to be, well, not due, but petitions are going to be filed at the very least in this state. I must say that this has been the cycle where I've seen the most petition drives in my calendar of any of the cycles I've worked so far. Every single day, I'm looking at Facebook, I'm looking at county GOP websites, and there's more and more petition drives happening. So listen, it seems like the local Republican organizations have really done a great job at getting their petitions out there. They've got the new, CRO, Congressional Republican Organizations, and working very hard.
Yeah.
And thank you to all those groups. But still, we're in the home stretch here, folks. Don't be one of those campaigns who's, a week out from petitions and you haven't even hit your minimum yet. Go out there, get your petitions, so you, your staff, your money-hungry consultants like me and Collin, we can sleep well at night, that you have the right amount of petitions. So thank you, everybody. You have a wonderful week, and enjoy the nice weather while it's still around, and God bless.
Larry, your final thoughts for the week.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed this. Hopefully I'll get asked back in, a couple of years or something like that. I just want to say I remain optimistic. Although we kvetched basically the entire 2 hours here, I do remain optimistic. I think part of that, though, is because we won the last national election. I think we have to keep winning them to turn the tide back. Collin, you brought up the story about Google essentially admitting that it was discriminating, right, against right-leaning people. And that stuff would never have come to light. It would have doubled and tripled down had the election gone the other way. It's a republic. If we can keep it, we got to keep winning. It's imperative because we can't go back to what we had the prior 4 years.
Yeah, I'll say it again. You can't change the laws. If you don't get elected, let's go win some elections. Travis, you brought the heat, my friend. Go for it. Your final word.
Okay, I'm going to do two very quickly. One is a little lame. One I think is pretty good. The first one, a little lame. So 2 weeks ago, I had my first chance. I went down to Floribama in Orange Beach, and we were sitting out. I was drinking a cold beer, and the band played Steve Miller. Some people call me the Space Cowboy. And I had not heard that song in forever. And it's still stuck in my head. And so if anybody's looking for a throwback song, man, Steve Miller band, love it. Good stuff. My other one I've been dwelling on a lot, that Charlie quote. Courage and cowardice, they're both viral. The choice is yours. What do you want to spread? We got to spread more courage. We got to close the gap.
I like it. Well, that's a great place to end. I'll simply say thank you to everybody who's watched. And let me say this, our producer ran the stats, and 60% of the people who watch our podcast are not subscribed. So let me be that typical podcaster who says like and subscribe, but please subscribe. We want you to get this content every week. We do put a ton of work in this. Our guests take time out of their day to equip you guys on the right in Illinois. So please subscribe here to our channel so you get this every week. We're going to be back in your inbox next week in the smoke-filled room. In the meantime, let's get our candidates on the ballot. Let's go kick some butt.